She said it loud enough for the whole room to hear. "You're a burden, Dad. My family can't keep carrying you." The words hit me before I could even understand them, sharp and humiliating, cutting through the small chatter around us until every voice fell quiet. People turned. Some pretended not to stare. Others looked at me with the kind of pity that strips a man of his dignity. In that moment, something inside me cracked. Not from age, not from weakness, but from shock I didn't know how to hold. I stood there trying to understand how my daughter, the same girl I once carried on my shoulders, could speak to me like that. She didn't even glance my way after saying it. She just crossed her arms and waited for me to react, as if she expected me to apologize for existing. I felt heat rise in my face, not anger at first, but shame. A heavy, choking shame I couldn't hide from the people around us. The worst part wasn't her words. It was seeing how easily the others believed her. The sideways glances, the small nods, the quiet whispers. Everyone accepted her version of me without knowing the truth. None of them knew that the home she lived in, the car she drove, the safety she bragged about, all came from the savings I spent a lifetime building but never used for myself. She depended on me more than she ever admitted. Yet she stood there calling me a weight on her shoulders. Her partner stood behind her, hands in his pockets, watching me the way someone watches a problem they hope will resolve itself. There was no concern in his eyes, no respect, no understanding, just an annoyance. As if my presence ruined whatever story he and my daughter had been shaping behind closed doors. When she turned to him for support, he nodded with a confident little smile, silently confirming that this humiliation was part of the plan. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. My throat tightened as I tried to steady myself. I had imagined many painful moments as I grew older, aches, memory slips, loneliness. But I never imagined my own child would tear me down in a room full of strangers. The humiliation settled deep, dragging a cold ache across my chest as I realized this wasn't just an emotional outburst. This was a pattern. Her behavior had been changing for months. Shorter visits, colder tone, questions that felt more like evaluations. But hearing her call me a burden in public exposed something I had refused to see. She no longer saw me as her father. She saw me as an inconvenience she needed to manage. The savings that kept her afloat didn't matter. The sacrifices meant nothing. She had rewritten the story, turning herself into a victim, and me into the problem she wanted to escape. As people drifted away, pretending they hadn't witnessed anything, I felt the humiliation shift into something heavier, an early warning of danger. If she could say this publicly, what was she saying privately? What lies had she already told? What plans were in motion that I didn't know about? The fear crept in quietly, rising as I thought about how money changes people, how control twists them, how entitlement blinds them. I walked out of that room slower than I walked in, not because of age, but because it felt like I was carrying the weight of her words on my back. They weren't just cruel. They were revealing. They showed me exactly where I stood in her life and how far she was willing to go to push me aside. What would you do if your own child called you a burden in public? I spent my whole life saving quietly. I wasn't a wealthy man, but I was careful. I worked overtime when I could, skipped small luxuries, and tucked away every extra dollar for a future I hoped would support my daughter if she ever needed help. And she did need help, more than once. The down payment for her home, the emergencies she couldn't handle, the months when her hours were cut and she needed support just to stay afloat. I gave without hesitation. I gave because she was my child. I never kept score, never reminded her of what I'd done. I believed that love didn't need receipts. But somewhere along the way, she stopped seeing the support as help. She started seeing it as her right. Instead of thanking me, she began telling me that she deserved stability and that I should want to take care of her family. It sounded harmless the first time, but the tone lingered. It wasn't gratitude, it was expectation. And expectation slowly grew into resentment whenever I hesitated to give more. Her partner played a part in it too. He was subtle at first. Small comments slipped into conversations, questions about my finances disguised as concern. "You've saved more than enough," he'd say lightly. "You shouldn't let money just sit there when it could help your daughter." He always phrased it like advice, but the meaning underneath was sharp. They wanted access, and they were growing impatient. I began noticing how often she mentioned my age when money came up. "You don't need much anymore," she'd say. "Why keep so much locked up when we have real expenses?" It wasn't about helping me. It was about convincing me to loosen my grip so she could tighten hers. And each time I tried to explain that I was saving for medical needs, home repairs, and the natural costs of growing old, she would sigh as if I was being unreasonable. The shift became clearer when I helped her with a bill one month. Instead of appreciation, she responded with, "You should have handled this earlier." It threw off our plans. Plans. My savings had become part of their household planning. My lifetime of work was now an assumed resource they felt entitled to use. I could see her partner's influence more plainly then, words crafted to make me feel guilty for not giving more. As their expectations grew, her tone toward me hardened. Calls became shorter, focused on what she needed rather than how I was doing. She'd ask questions about my accounts, my insurance, my monthly expenses. At first, I thought she was concerned. But concern doesn't come with irritation when you don't answer fast enough. Concern doesn't come with frustration when you say you need to think. Every time I paused, she acted like I was withholding something she was owed. She stopped asking if I could help and started telling me what she needed. She stopped acknowledging my sacrifices and treated them like overdue responsibilities. If I reminded her about how hard I'd worked for those savings, she'd dismiss it with, "You act like I never struggle. You owe it to your family to help." Family. That word used to mean love and support. Now it sounded like a demand. And in the quiet moments after those conversations, I felt something I never expected to feel toward my own child. Fear. Not fear of her as a person, but fear of what she was becoming. Fear of the coldness that crept into her voice when money was involved. Fear that she didn't just want help, she wanted control. I told myself I was imagining it, that stress and pressure were changing her temporarily. But deep down, I knew the truth. Dependence had slowly transformed into entitlement, and entitlement was inching toward something darker. I could feel her slipping away from the daughter I raised and into someone who saw my savings, my home, and maybe even my future as pieces she could claim. And the worst part was realizing she didn't think she was taking anything. She believed she was collecting what she deserved. I didn't notice the first envelope right away. It sat mixed in with the usual mail. Utility bills, pharmacy reminders, a grocery circular I never read. But when I opened it, something inside me tightened. It was a notice confirming a beneficiary update on one of my accounts. I stared at the page, reading it twice, then a third time, hoping I misunderstood. But there it was, in black and white. Changes I had never requested, signed with a shaky version of my name that didn't belong to my hand. My heart thumped in my ears as I traced the fake signature, feeling a cold sting of disbelief settle into my chest. I told myself it had to be a mistake. A clerical error, maybe. Someone mixed up files. But the doubt wouldn't leave me. I checked the rest of the mail and found another envelope, this one from an insurance company. Inside was a partially completed form listing my daughter as the primary beneficiary and her partner as secondary. Some lines were filled in, others were left open, waiting for a signature. My signature. The space where it should go was blank, but shaded lightly, like someone had tested a pen there. My pulse slowed into a heavy, uneasy rhythm. When I called my daughter, I hoped she would be as shocked as I was. Instead, she sighed like I had interrupted something important. "Dad, those forms are standard. Everyone updates that stuff eventually," she said. "You worry too, much." There was no surprise in her voice, only annoyance. She didn't ask what documents I meant. She already knew. I tried to explain that the changes weren't mine, that someone had signed my name. She brushed it off. "Maybe you forgot," she said. "You've been misplacing things lately." The words were casual, but they cut deep. She wasn't dismissing the paperwork. She was dismissing me. That night, I sat with both documents laid out on the table. The lighting made the mismatched signatures even clearer. My daughter's partner's name appeared on the digital trail of one of the forms, listed as the person who initiated the update request. I felt my stomach drop. He had no business touching my accounts, no right to even know they existed. But there it was. His email, his contact information, his timestamp. My hands trembled as I realized how easily someone else could shape my life without me knowing. The forms weren't just paperwork. They were warnings. Someone was planning a future that didn't include my say. Someone wanted my decisions, my identity, my autonomy to change hands quietly. I grabbed a notebook from the drawer and wrote down everything. The dates, the document names, the strange details, the fake signature. I never thought I'd have to keep records to protect myself from my own child. But a quiet instinct told me I had no choice. Each note felt like a small shield, a way to hang on to the truth before someone tried to twist it. A week later, another envelope came, this one with a draft of a power of attorney form. My daughter's name sat where an agent's name would go. The lines that required my approval were pre-filled with language about declining capacity and future medical decisions. I didn't need anyone to explain what that meant. She was preparing for a decline she had already decided I was having. She was preparing the world for it too. The fear that washed over me wasn't loud. It was cold and quiet, settling into the edges of my mind. If she could change documents without my consent, what else could she change? What stories had she already told? What plans had already been set in motion behind my back? I folded the paperwork carefully, placed it in a folder, and tucked it away somewhere safe. That was the night I understood something I never imagined I'd have to face. I wasn't just dealing with disrespect anymore. I was dealing with a slow, quiet theft of my life on paper. What would you do if paperwork appeared with your name already signed? I first heard it from a neighbor who rarely involves himself in anyone's business. He walked up to me outside the house, holding a bag of groceries, and asked gently, "Are you doing okay these days? Your daughter said you've been slipping a bit." His voice trailed off like he regretted repeating it. I felt heat climb up my neck as the shame settled in. Slipping. That single word clung to me, heavy and humiliating. I told him I was fine, but even he looked uncertain, as if my answer wasn't enough to erase what she had planted. At church that Sunday, the whispers felt stronger. A woman I'd known for years squeezed my hand and said she was praying for my memory issues. Another man asked if I needed help organizing my medications. I didn't even realize people knew what medications I took. But someone did, and someone had told them. They spoke slowly, like I was fragile, like I had broken somewhere I hadn't noticed. I walked out before the service ended, feeling every pair of eyes following me to the door. At home, their words echoed in my head. I kept replaying every conversation with my daughter over the past few months, the tests she slipped into our phone calls, the way she repeated questions as if checking my answers, the comments she made about my age whenever money came up. It wasn't just concern. It was preparation. She was trying to build a story about me, one rumor at a time. Her partner didn't hide his part in it. He made a post online about caring for elders who don't realize they're declining. It wasn't subtle. It was a public warning shot, a way to make sure people saw me from their angle. When someone commented asking if everything was okay with me, he replied with a line that stopped me cold. We're trying our best to help him face reality. Reality. As if my life belonged to them now. I called her that evening. My voice shook as I asked why she was telling people I was confused, why she was spreading stories that weren't true. She didn't hesitate. "Dad, you're making this harder by pretending nothing's wrong," she said flatly. "People need to understand why I'm stepping in." Her tone was so calm, so sure of itself, that for a moment I wondered if she even believed the lies she was telling, or if she simply didn't care anymore. I told her I was perfectly capable of handling my own affairs. She exhaled sharply, like I was a child arguing past bedtime. "You forget things. You lose track. You can't keep living alone and pretending it's fine." Every word was measured. Every word was designed to make me doubt myself. But I knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't describing my decline. She was laying the groundwork for control she needed justified before she took the next step. After that call, I sat alone in the dark living room for a long time. The house felt smaller, like the walls had moved in closer without warning. The isolation was worse than any physical pain. When people you've known your whole life start looking at you differently, it chips away at something inside you, your identity, your confidence, your dignity. And hers weren't just careless words. They were deliberate strikes meant to weaken how others saw me. For the first time, I understood the danger I was in. Because once people believe you're losing your mind, they stop listening. They stop trusting you. And they start trusting the ones who speak the loudest about your so-called decline. She wasn't just distancing herself. She was clearing the path, making sure no one would question her when she tried to take control of my decisions, my finances, and eventually my future. And the cruel truth was becoming clearer each day. She wasn't trying to help me. She was trying to replace me. I thought the worst had already happened when I saw the beneficiary changes. But those were only the edges of something far more deliberate. The real blow came the morning I opened a thick envelope from a law office I'd never heard of. Inside were drafts of a power of attorney, full control over my financial, legal, and medical decisions, naming my daughter as primary and her partner as alternate. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. Some sections were already filled in. Some lines had notes in the margins. It was clear these weren't blank forms waiting for me. These were forms crafted around me. Forms created under the assumption that I would sign, or that someone else might sign for me. At the bottom of one page, there was a faint signature that looked almost like mine, but not enough to fool anyone who knew my handwriting. It was a warning, a quiet message that they were willing to try again until it passed. The horror settled into my chest slowly, cold and steady. This wasn't help. This wasn't care. This was an attempt to take over everything I was while I was still alive. Before I could process it, my doctor's office called. The nurse's tone was careful, controlled. She told me someone had contacted them, asking if I had shown signs of mental decline and whether I needed a capacity evaluation. When I asked who made the request, she hesitated before saying my daughter's partner had been very persistent. He had no legal authority, no medical rights, no reason to be asking those questions, unless he was trying to justify taking control. I felt my throat tighten. A capacity evaluation isn't just a test. It's a doorway. Once someone pushes you through it, your voice doesn't carry the same weight. And they were already trying to build a case that I belonged on the other side of that doorway. Later that afternoon, I went to the bank to calm my nerves, thinking maybe I was imagining the worst. The representative recognized my name the moment I sat down. She pulled up my file and frowned. "We denied a request to add an additional signer to your accounts," she said carefully. "The documentation didn't match your signature. We thought you should know." I stared at her, shocked into silence. She leaned in, lowering her voice. "We see these patterns sometimes. Older adults targeted for control. Please watch your accounts closely." Hearing a stranger say the words I had been too afraid to speak out loud hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't in my head. It wasn't paranoia. They were making moves, quiet, calculated moves, to take over my money, my health care, my decisions, and eventually my life. I went home with a folder of printed documents, warnings, and evidence. I laid everything out across the kitchen table, each page a piece of the truth I could no longer ignore. A power of attorney drafted without my consent. A medical proxy attempt. A denied bank request. A call to my doctor. Conversations with neighbors seeded with rumors. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't stress. It was a coordinated effort. My daughter and her partner weren't waiting for me to fail. They were building a case for why they should be allowed to take control before I even had the chance. As I gathered the documents into a binder, I felt the horror shift into something sharper. Outrage. And beneath that outrage was a quiet, steady determination. If they wanted to rewrite my life, then I needed to protect it. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't confused. I wasn't gone. I was still here. And I planned to fight for every piece of my life they tried to claim. What would you do if someone tried to take your choices away? I sat across from my lawyer with the binder of documents resting heavy on my lap. He opened it slowly, page by page, his expression growing more serious with each form. Each forged signature, each note I had written in the margins to explain how it had appeared in my life. When he finally closed the binder, he didn't look confused or hesitant. He looked certain. "We need to file protective orders immediately," he said. "This is a coordinated attempt to take over your finances, your property, and your medical decisions." Hearing someone else speak those words out loud made the reality land harder. Within 2 days, he filed emergency protections, freezing unauthorized changes on my accounts, restricting access to my medical information, and placing legal barriers around my home and property. I watched him send each document off with a steady hand, grateful for the confidence he had, even when I didn't. When he looked at me afterward, his voice softened. "You're not alone in this," he said. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that. The police contacted me shortly after. They wanted to take a formal statement. 2 officers sat at my kitchen table, listening as I walked them through everything. From the beneficiary changes, to the forged POA drafts, to the calls from the doctor's office. They didn't rush me. They didn't question my clarity. They treated every piece of evidence with respect. When I finished, one of them said, "This isn't confusion. This is exploitation." My chest tightened at the word, but I knew he was right. They questioned my daughter first. I wasn't there, but my lawyer told me she reacted with loud disbelief and anger, claiming I was overreacting, claiming I misunderstood, claiming I wasn't remembering things correctly. She deflected every question, acted insulted that the police would even consider her capable of such behavior. But denial only goes so far when the paperwork tells another story. Her partner didn't hold up as well. When they questioned him separately, the calm confidence he always wore cracked. He tried to blame stress, then blamed the banks, then blamed confusion with online forms, then said he thought my daughter already had permission. Each excuse contradicted the one before it. And the officers noted every inconsistency. The investigators gathered enough evidence to take the case seriously. They traced the unauthorized document requests, the digital signatures, the phone calls to my doctor, the attempted access to my accounts. At every step, my daughter and her partner were connected. Not one mistake, not one accident. A pattern, clear and deliberate. When the officers came back to update me, they didn't sugarcoat it. "We are opening a formal investigation for elder financial exploitation," one said. "And based on what we have so far, the case is strong." Those words should have brought relief. Instead, they brought a deep, aching sorrow. Because this wasn't a story about strangers. It was about my own child. I sat there after they left, staring at the empty chairs where they had been. I felt the grief settle in, a grief heavier than any I had known, not because of the legal steps or the paperwork or the hearings to come, but because the truth was undeniable now. She wasn't trying to help me. She wasn't worried about my future. She wasn't stepping in out of love. She was trying to take over my life while I still lived it. And yet, beneath the sorrow, something else took root. Resolve. The kind of quiet strength that comes from knowing the truth is finally being seen. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't losing my mind. The law saw it. My lawyer saw it. The investigators saw it. Now the world would see what she had become. Should the law punish financial abuse as harshly as physical abuse? When the day finally came, I sat in the quiet of the courtroom, feeling older than I ever had before. Not because of my age, but because of the weight of everything that had led us there. The rumors, the forged documents, the whispered doubts from neighbors. The fear that my life could be taken from me without a single physical touch. My lawyer sat beside me, steady and calm, while my daughter and her partner waited across the room. They didn't look at me. They didn't even look at each other. It was strange how people who worked so closely to tear someone down suddenly had nothing to say when the truth came to light. The judge reviewed the evidence with a firm, measured tone. Every page of unauthorized paperwork, every denied access attempt, every call they made behind my back formed a chain that stretched across the courtroom. Hearing it all spoken aloud felt like reliving each moment again, only this time with witnesses who understood what it meant. This wasn't family conflict. It was exploitation. When the penalties were read, the room felt heavier, not lighter. My daughter was restricted from accessing my financial accounts, property information, or medical records. She was placed under a temporary protective order, preventing her from making decisions on my behalf. The judge spoke slowly, making sure every word was clear. You attempted to undermine your father's autonomy, she said. The court cannot ignore that. Her partner faced harsher consequences. The investigation had uncovered his role as the primary instigator, the one who initiated forms, pressured medical staff, and pushed for evaluations he had no right to request. He received charges related to attempted fraud and unlawful procurement of personal information. I watched his shoulders drop as the judge listed his penalties. There was no more confidence in him, no smug glances. Just the realization that he had crossed a line the law would not overlook. My daughter tried to speak, offering excuses that felt thin and practiced. She said she was only trying to prepare for the future, that she thought I needed help, that the forms were misunderstood. But the judge cut through it with one simple question. If he truly needed help, why did you not discuss it with him directly? Her silence after that question said more than any accusation could. I didn't say much during the proceedings. I didn't need to. Everything I wanted to say had already been proven. But as the judge confirmed the protective measures, ensuring my rights, my home, and my decisions were legally shielded, I felt a slow, deep breath ease out of me. It wasn't victory. It wasn't triumph. It was dignity being returned to me inch by inch. I thought about all the years I spent saving quietly so she could have a better life. The years I helped with bills, repairs, emergencies. The late nights I stayed awake worrying about her. None of that mattered to her anymore. She saw only what she could take, not what had been given. That truth hurt more than any signature forged or rumor spread. When the hearing ended, the courtroom emptied quickly. My daughter walked out without looking back. Her partner followed, escorted by an officer. I remained seated a moment longer, letting the quiet settle around me. Justice doesn't heal everything, but it does bring clarity. It reminds you that your life has value, even when someone close to you tries to convince the world otherwise. As I walked out of the courthouse, the air felt colder, but cleaner somehow. I wasn't the same man who walked in months earlier, burdened, doubting, humiliated. I was someone who had survived betrayal and stood up for himself when it mattered most. The law had seen the truth, and no amount of money, guilt, or manipulation could buy back what they tried to take. Dignity isn't something you inherit. It's something you protect. And that day, I did. I used to think aging meant slowing down, becoming quieter, learning to live with small aches and long memories. I never imagined it would mean defending my own life from the person I once carried in my arms. Now, sitting in the stillness of my home, I understand aging differently. It's not just about what the body loses. It's about what the heart survives. And somehow, despite everything, mine is still beating, wounded but steady. When I look back now, I see how many years I spent trying to build something for her. Every extra shift, every skipped vacation, every dollar I saved was meant to give her the safety I never had. The savings she leaned on weren't created by luck. They were built with sacrifice, mine. I protected that money so she could have a life free of the fear I felt growing up. I never imagined she'd twist those sacrifices into a reason to claim ownership of what I had earned. But betrayal has a way of revealing what you don't want to see. She didn't just want help. She wanted control. She didn't just lean on me. She tried to replace me. And no matter how painful that truth is, I finally accept it without excuses. Love doesn't erase what happened. Forgiveness isn't something she has earned. And grief doesn't mean I should open the door to someone who would take everything and still call me a burden. The legal protections are all in place now. My accounts belong only to me. My medical decisions are secured. My home, my documents, my identity, they are no longer vulnerable to her hands or her partner's influence. These boundaries aren't walls built out of anger. They are shields built out of survival. Shields I never thought I'd need, but ones I'm grateful to have now. Emotionally, the boundaries needed to come too. I no longer wait for her calls. I no longer rehearse the conversations I wish we could have. I no longer hope for the version of her that existed years ago. Acceptance wasn't easy, and it didn't happen in a single moment. It came slowly, settling into my bones as I realized that holding on to someone who hurts you is its own kind of self-destruction. She may stay gone forever, and I am finally strong enough to let that be. Some people hear justice and imagine revenge. But justice isn't about destroying someone. It's about protecting what's left of you after they've tried to take it. The courts didn't give me back the years I lost or repair the trust she broke. But they did return something just as important: the right to live the rest of my life on my terms. That alone has more weight than any apology she never gave. These days, I've learned to be grateful for smaller things. Quiet mornings, a locked door I chose, my own name written only by my hand. Gratitude isn't something anyone can demand from me anymore. It isn't something I owe to someone simply because we share blood. Gratitude belongs to the ones who show up with love, not entitlement. The ones who protect instead of take. The ones who stay when life becomes difficult, not the ones who circle like vultures waiting to claim what's left. I don't know if my daughter ever thinks about what she nearly stole from me. My dignity, my independence, the life I built with my own hands. But I know this. I am no longer waiting for her to understand. I am no longer trying to soften what happened. I am no longer pretending her betrayal was anything less than intentional. Some doors are meant to stay closed. Some ties are meant to be cut. And some endings are the only way to save what remains of yourself. Should a parent forgive a child who tries to take everything and still calls them a burden?